So it is now officially past 7 p.m. My fast has started. I'm downloading Labyrinth of the Demon King onto my PS5 because that's going to be the horror game I play this month. And I'm about to start my my horror movie marathon with X. Now, obviously, it's not going to be a night-long marathon because, we all got to work in the morning. But every night watching a horror film. And while that isn't the best example of what I want to talk about, I believe that Christians should watch horror. Now, obviously, like I said, there are caveats to that. Movies like X, slasher films, gory horror films, splatter flicks, slashers, probably not the best for things like that, even though they are a lot of fun. Dead Alive and Bad Taste. Peter Jackson movies, mind you. Sorry, my hair's aggravating me right now because that wants to do that thing. But splatter films, gore films, I'm not really talking about that. Your Hostels, your Saws. I'm talking because I feel as though when I say Christians should watch horror films, this isn't more directed towards younger Christians and things like that, even though some might still believe it. A lot of Christians tend to not like horror films because they are normally really violent. But, if you talk to an older school Christian, like someone like my Nana or my aunties, people like that, they think they're demonic. And while some of them do definitely have, I'm not saying this as your soul's gonna get possessed by a horror film or anything like that. I'm not saying that at all. But there's definitely horror films that lean into the evil of demons and things like that. You got The Omen, The Exorcist, and things like that. But even those movies, The Exorcist, the author of the book, wanted to show good beating the devil. And even in the revised version of Exorcist 3 Heretic, no, it's not Exorcist 3 the Heretic. I think it's just called Exorcist 3 Legion. Exorcist 2 is Heretic. Can't believe I made that mistake. But Exorcist 3 Legion, or as it was originally just called Legion, is a great example of not necessarily pro-Christian horror, but horror movies that show Christianity in a good light. And even if we talk about vampire films, check this out. Everyone knows the story of Salem's Lot, right? The Stephen King vampire book. In the book, there's a moment where the priest comes to the vampire holding up a cross. And he says, if you truly believe that the cross I can't remember the quote off the top of my head completely, but if you believe that cross will protect you, lower it if you truly believe. And, he doesn't lower it because he doesn't truly believe that God is protecting him. So it really does show things like a good strength of faith, because they do recreate that in the newer movie of Salem's Lot. And even in a lot of vampire lore, vampires are spawns of the devil. So that's why you got the crosses, you got holy water that damages them. Sometimes it gets a little ridiculous, like in the Hammer horror movies, they say even running water, which is kind of silly. And you got this thing here, who, like I said, is my walking, talking Halloween decoration. I guess she's going to be joining us in convincing people to watch more horror movies. They say black cats are not bad luck, but they never had her. But anyway. And movies like The Omen, in that movie, at least the first one, the devil does become victorious. But it is a good lesson in how manipulative evil can be, if you want to look at it from that perspective. Where yes, evil wins, but evil wins, in my opinion, the way evil will win is more subtle and more nuanced, not just straight up, I'm in your face, I'm going to take over the world. And that's what the movie The Omen, I think, excels at. It shows evil as innocent, and then progressively the evil just takes control. Or in this case, it's the Antichrist. And I know in the third movie they do defeat him, but then they made a fourth one. Does anyone remember that movie? But anyway. And there's that movie that came out a couple years ago. It's called Nefarious, which was actually based on a book by a Christian author. And that movie, it does have some preachy moments in it, but it's not as preachy as one might expect. I mean, if you go into it knowing it's a Christian horror film, you're probably going to read, it depends on your outlook. If you're going into it being like, oh, this is going to have a lot of preachiness, I'm not going to like it, it's either going to be one way or the other. You're either going to be like, yep, that wasn't as preachy as I was expecting, and I don't like it. Or you're going to be like, oh, that wasn't as preachy as I was expecting. It wasn't that bad. I'm on the latter of the two. I thought it wasn't as preachy as I was expecting it to be. It wasn't that bad. And here's the thing. Nefarious was actually an overall well done. It's more of a thriller than a horror film, but not bad. I think it's on Amazon Prime now, if you want to check it out. Definitely, I think, a good movie for the Halloween nights. You can tell they definitely cared about the genre. The lighting's all there. The acting's all there. And when it comes to horror and Christianity, like I said, movies that are like just gory splatter flicks, that's not really what I'm talking about. Like, check out Saint Maud. This is more of a movie that has about someone who has like a godlike complex, and it really doesn't become true horror until like more towards the end. It's not even, again, this falls more under thriller than it does horror. And even movies that are more inherently about the evil winning, you know, movies like Hereditary, it shows, like I said, more subtle evil, or in The Witch, or Witch as some people call it. Because like, I love that movie because it's more my thing. I'm really into slow burn atmospheric horror, and that movie is very much slow burn atmospheric horror. How the devil in of himself is nefarious. He is sneaky. He's not going to be right in your face. As good as, like, because The Prophecy is another great example of a good movie. In that, even though the devil is not as over the top, he's still blatantly evil. And that's kind of where I think sometimes, where a lot of the times movies get the devil wrong. Angel Heart is another good example. At first, like, you can tell there's something, again, it's like there's something off with Robert De Niro. Louis Cypher, his character. Great movie, by the way, again. Shows how the devil works more behind the scenes than he does just right in your face. So that's what I mean by even darker horror films, spiritually dark horror films, not even including gory horror films and things like that. Why I think Christians should watch them more is because they do show how nefarious evil is. It's not in your face. Like, I came up with my own idea for a movie about the devil. The devil is always hiding in plain sight, and that's why I like movies like that. I mean, there's even that movie, The Devil. Say what you want about that movie. My friend and I really enjoy that movie, actually. It's goofy, butter side down, obviously, but outside of that, the movie's not that bad. It's actually really enjoyable. Definitely a good movie to have your friends over, you know, get a couple of beers. I don't drink, but you know what I mean? And then you just watch and you have a good time with. It's that type of movie. And then when it's revealed who the devil actually is, it's like, oh, wow, again, the devil is sneaky. The devil is nefarious. The devil is not immediately in your face. Remember, in biblical lore, that one thing that the devil is he's God's most beautiful angel. He's the light bringer. But then he turned against God, and now he wants his creation to suffer. So he's going to be very much doing things to make people suffer as a whole. He's always going to, because my vision of the devil is not, like I said, in your face, bombastic, Robert De Niro type. I think I swapped the two characters. Al Pacino, I'm talking about The Devil's Advocate. Robert De Niro, I'm talking about Angel Heart. I don't know if I said Robert De Niro was Angel Heart, if I said Al Pacino for that one. But Al Pacino was in The Devil's Advocate, which is also a really cool movie, where he's more over the top. But again, It's a great lesson in the devil being a subtle, nefarious being. I mean, he's not that subtle, he's over the top, but the way the devil works is he wants you to believe he has your best interest in mind, but he's always like, he's conniving. He wants to do you wrong in the end. And even in the end of The Witch, she joins up with the witches at the end, but her whole family, her whole family had to suffer. That's not really that happy of an ending. That's not a good ending at all. For her, maybe, but for the family and the innocent kids in that family, the innocent family members, no. Maybe I have to rewatch that movie to see whether or not the family is truly as innocent as my brain remembers them. I know the dad was more aggressive. He was a stern dad from the time period, but he wasn't necessarily an evil person, as far as I know. I know they got kicked out of their town or village, but I can't remember why. You have to forgive me. It's been years since I've seen The Witch. When I say it's been years, I mean, I haven't seen it since the year it came out. But outside of that, though, movies that involve evil, movies that involve the devil, and even movies that involve pseudo versions of hell, like Jacob's Ladder. Hell, like in the biblical terms, is more of an empty and hollow place. So movies with fire and brimstone, you know, movies like The House That Jack Built. That movie is another, like, I don't recommend, like, your Nana watch that, obviously. That has a very absurd graphic violence because the guy thinks he's, like, this masterful artist. And he believes his killings are just one glorious piece of art. And he's trying to reason his way out of going to hell. And then, well, if you've seen the movie, you know how it ends. But the Dante's Inferno version of hell isn't actually hell. Hell in itself is very much a cold and empty place. Very hollow feeling. Where your spirit is more tortured because of the way it feels down there. It's not like you're being whipped to death for all eternity. It's very much empty spiritually. That's hell, at least the Christian version of hell. There's different variations of hell, because the Buddhist version of hell, which is actually meant to be a temporary place, if I remember correctly. Correct me if I'm wrong, by the way. It's meant to be more temporary, where you have all your bad karma tortured out of you, and then you're reincarnated. In the Christian version of hell, it's eternity of emptiness. Because a lot of the fire and brimstone stuff is taken from either Dante's Inferno or actually more Asian versions of their hell. They call it something else, actually. And again, this is one thing that I really think that why Christians would benefit from a genre like horror. It's open now. It's even open for experimentation too, because horror is like one of the most open genres out there. You can make action horror, horror comedies, dramatic horror. Dramatic horror, I think personally, is probably one of the best in terms of what actually makes things scary, because Red Letter Media, they talked about it. They said what made The Exorcist scary was they had all these real world things happening, and then there was an actual like demon involved in it, and that because it builds up to the actual scares. And that's why, and I think that Christians can actually take advantage of that in storytelling. The door's wide open. I mean, Mel Gibson, say what you want about him, the man can make some pretty good darned movies. So I think if he wanted to make a straight up horror film that's Christian inspired, I mean, he got the violence down with The Passion of the Christ. So I don't want him making a Christian splatter flick, obviously. But to see him like put in the effort to a spiritual horror film that really grasps with what Christianity means, or not necessarily means, but a horror film that Christians would truly find scary. I think he could do that. I think any director can do that, really. But you have to be appreciative of the faith also. not necessarily, you don't even, not necessarily have to follow it, but you have to know more about it, know more than what I do. And because I'm still learning about, like, going through my faith, I'm still learning a lot about Christianity, mind you. And, like, obviously, don't make a torture movie, don't make a splatter movie, don't make a slasher film, but make something that truly feels in the spirit, like that you feel it in your soul. That would make a true Christian horror film. Like, obviously, you can't be doing things that are essentially a Sunday morning sermon dressed up as a horror film, because that won't work. The best type of horror film is like the story and movie and atmosphere comes first, and then you're getting it a little bit clicked in the head. Be like, oh, okay, stuff like that. Because no one wants to go to a Sunday morning sermon unless you're going to an actual Sunday morning sermon when you're trying to watch a movie, because these are two different things. And I think if we can make a truly great Christian horror film, it might be able to attract more people to the faith, because art is a very important thing when you're trying to bring messages to people. And again, you can't beat people over the head with the message. The message has to be there, obviously, but no one likes being preached to. I mean, I do when I'm at church, but when I'm trying to watch a movie, I would rather watch the movie and experience the movie and not have the movie try to talk down to me, because that's ultimately where the issues tend to lie, is when movies do preach, they're more talking down to the audience as opposed to informing them. And that's why a lot of Christian movies don't really work that well. Or if they're not even talking down necessarily, they're talking at, not to. They're not doing the show don't tell, they're tell not show. And that's a huge issue with a lot of Christian movies. So I truly think that if people of the faith really grab onto the horror genre and start working in that field and start making some great horror movies, it can really change the game. Because there's so much within the Christian lore that is terrifying. I mean, we're considered God-fearing people. Now, obviously, we don't fear God in the terms of like, oh my gosh, she's going to sneak up on me in the middle of the night. Ooh, no, it's not like that. But think about it. Think about like biblically accurate angels. Think about how God is such a magnificent being that those who lay eyes upon him could potentially just die because his glory is too magnificent. That's basically the inspiration for most of H.P. Lovecraft's stories. That's basically like, tell me that's not a take on cosmic horror. Now, obviously, I'm not calling Christianity cosmic horror, but tell me that doesn't in some way sound like a good cosmic horror. Like, at least it didn't inspire it in some way. But a movie involving biblically accurate angels, like, that's why I liked Nope so much, is because it was a movie that kind of had a biblically accurate angel in it. Spoilers if you haven't seen Nope. But Christians should really watch more horror films, because you can learn more how evil works in subtle ways, if it's done well. Because that's what I'm talking about here, is if the movie's done well, you will see that evil lurks. It's not in your face. It's not Jason Voorhees. It's not Freddy Krueger. I mean, maybe more so Freddy Krueger than the first movie. Or maybe even the first Friday the 13th. Because the first Friday the 13th, you know, Jason isn't a killer. It's his mom, even though the whole movie is making you believe it's Jason. Or even in Psycho by Alfred Hitchcock. The big plot twist of that movie was it's Norman Bates, not his mom. Again, evil is subtle. And I think that's a great lesson Christians can take from horror stories. Isn't it great now that I'm actually figuring out what I'm trying to say at the very end of the video? But I believe that if, outside of like the big ones, like, you know, The Exorcist, The Omen, Exorcist 3, a little bit of Hereditary. Obviously, movies, with the exception of movies like, Drag Me to Hell, The Wicker Man, Cowboys for Christ, or The Wicker Tree. I think that's what they called the movie. I actually read that book, by the way. It's not that bad. But I haven't seen the movie. I've seen the original Wicker Man, but I've never seen the remake, nor have I seen the sequel, The Wicker Tree. I heard it's accurate to the book, but the people who were talking about it said they didn't really like it that much. The first Wicker Man is actually really good. But again, I wouldn't call that the best idea for breaking a Christian into horror movies if you know how that movie ends. But again, that's another thing where the evil was being sneaky to even a person of faith, and he wasn't able to figure it out until the end of the movie. I think these are good lessons that Christians can take from horror films if you're watching the right ones, because you can learn how much behind the scenes evil is, how it can influence even the people that try to walk with Christ the best. Maybe I'm crazy, maybe I'm wrong. But I think accepting and diving into horror is a good way for Christians to step into pop culture a little bit more. Because I want to see a pretty darn good Christian horror film. One that's well made. Doesn't have to have the biggest budget. The best horror films are normally the ones with the smallest budget. I mean, Paranormal Activity. My roommates and I could make that movie if we wanted to. We just need, some FX software. But, I mean, I say we can make it, but we'd probably do it terribly, if I'm going to be honest. But it doesn't have to be big budget. Give it a little budget. Get some solid actors. Get a good director, a good writer. Like I said, make sure they're showing, not telling. And you can make a darn good Christian horror film. I know it. Anyways, I got a call for the night. I got to watch X. Again, not the best example for a movie for horror movies for Christians to watch. But I'm still excited to watch it because, it's that time of year. Anyways, give horror a chance if you're not sure about it. Make sure you find one that's more up your speed. Whether or not you're into fast-paced storytelling, like, The Exorcist, Poltergeist, things like that. Or if you want something a little bit slower, something like The Black Coat's Daughter, The Witch. Again, a lot of this stuff is more evil being sneaky, not upfront. And again, I think that's a great lesson for a lot of Christians. Anyways, I gotta watch the movie. I'll catch you guys later. Peace.